Yo, everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics, brought to you by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is the owner of the Portland, Oregon comic shop Books with Pictures. It's Katie Pryde. Thanks for coming on, Katie.
Happy to be here, David.
So it's about 3 hours into your Thursday at Books with Pictures. How's the day going?
It's slowish, which is good because we had a full day yesterday and then an evening event as well. So we got to get the books back on the shelves.
I presume that means you actually got comics this week?
We did. We got all our comics.
My shop has DC in, but they still order Marvel from Diamond. And so they don't have anything from Diamond. They got all the Lunar stuff on time, but no, Diamond is consistently inconsistent in their experience. But yeah, anyway, so no comics for me yet. But, you know, you said it's slowish. How does, like, the day-to-day variance work for Books with Pictures? Because your shop is, I don't want to say it's unusual, but it's its own flavor. It's not strictly, like, Wednesday Warriors. It's not strictly new comics. Are Tuesday and Wednesday still, like, the big days for you, or is it pretty varied day-to-day?
So Tuesday is not really a day for us. We do put the DC comics out if we have received them, but it is not, we don't prioritize Tuesday as a release day.
Sure.
Wednesday's our release day, and we definitely have Wednesday Warriors. Wednesday tends to be our second hottest day in the week after Saturday.
Ooh.
So our big day is a Saturday. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, that weekend space is definitely our strongest. But really, in terms of sales, Saturdays are hottest, then Wednesdays, then Sundays, then Fridays. And frankly, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday are the days when we get things done.
Yeah, those are very necessary days, I imagine.
They are. It's, it's always a little cringy to look at and be like, well, I made as much money as I paid people to work today, but, at least the work got done.
Well, and I know that one thing that's changed a lot is, a lot of attention has been put on to single issue distributors like splintering, and there being like multiple of them now. But I mean, every comic shop I talk to deals with a ton of distributors, especially when you're talking about like book market stuff or comic related, but not specifically comic products and stuff like that. And I imagine those other days are pretty necessary to do the work that's necessary to make all those sales on the other days.
I mean, I would say yes. One of the main changes of the last 2 years is that I'm on the floor less. I'm actually only on the floor 2 days a week, sort of as a full day, which I miss because book selling is my favorite part of this job. But in order to keep up with the multiple distributors, to manage the taxes and schedules and bookkeeping, to work with librarians and nonprofits, and to do the ComicsPRO work, it turns out that I'm only a little bit behind if I'm spending less time on the shop floor.
Sure. How much does the role change on like a daily basis? Do you try to have a plan, or does the job kind of limit your ability to make a really solid plan on a daily basis?
The second one. I mean, mostly Mondays are my day off. That's just my desk day. So that's Mondays are when I make my to-do list of everything that needs to get done for the week. And I usually think of it as like my Monday to-do list, but it takes a week to get done because on Monday I can get things done usually. And then for the rest of the week, it's putting out fires. And so a lot of times I'll start with a to-do list and I'll end with the same to-do list, having worked for 10 hours. And it's very disorienting. It sometimes helps to just write down like, well, here's what you did do. Because it's like, no, I didn't get anything done today, but I'm exhausted.
I feel like one of the big changes for me in terms of work, and this is definitely not a healthy place to be, is when it's like my time off, the difference will be instead of being at my desk on a laptop, I will be on a couch with a laptop, which is like, that's my casual time. I'm like, I don't think that's good. But I think you were saying earlier that you try to give yourself a day off. Are you a 7-day-a-week person, or do you try to give yourself a little leeway?
I technically am not on the schedule on Sundays or Mondays. And I usually take Sunday as family time, and I take Monday as personal housework, errands time. But that Monday time also turns into, call all of something about the pace of this job means that there tends to collect a lot of clutter at the end of the week, like stuff I need to call a distributor or the city or a contractor about will crop up on Thursday, Friday. And so the beginning of the work week, the Monday, is often when a lot of those calls get made, because something didn't happen. But also, especially with Penguin Random House, because they keep East Coast hours and don't have West Coast customer service, if anything happens past 2 p.m. on a Friday, we can't reach them.
Yeah.
And so those are often the Monday morning calls.
Yeah. I have to imagine that, I actually haven't been, I always want to say the new version of Books with Pictures, but you've been there since 2019, so that's not exactly fair. But I just haven't been to it because of the whole pandemic thing. I aspire to go there at some point, but one nice thing, I would say, okay, I'm going to say nice thing, but in reality, it might be a curse and a blessing at times, is you live above the shop, right? Like, so I imagine that makes work-life balance even more interesting when your work and life are literally separated by a floor.
It does, definitely. There are lovely things about it. If there is a question that is genuinely just a really quick question, the computer's misbehaving, can you fix it?
Right.
It is really nice that I don't have a commute on a day that is an office day to go and get that managed. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Or when we're hosting an event that I'm not running, but I want to be able to make an appearance at, it is absolutely lovely that I can make an appearance and then be back making dinner for the kids. My favorite thing about it that's kind of new this year, because my kids are in a really like ravenous reading mode right now, is that my son has decided, he's 12, he has decided that he is going to read a graphic novel every day.
What?
Like a middle grade graphic novel, start to finish every day. And his time that he has carved out in his day to do that is after he has been put to bed. He gets up and turns the light back on and reads a graphic novel. And if he doesn't have a book handy that he wants to read, he sneaks downstairs and gets himself a book. And often, like, I will have read them their story and given them their nighttime tea and put them to bed, and then I will hear the creak on the stairs as he goes down to fetch himself another book. And often his sister will call out from her room and be like, get me one too.
I can't even imagine. I never really thought about that before, but being a kid living above a comic shop would be, I don't know. In my mind, it would be amazing. I would have lost my mind because I would always spend far too much time at comic shop when I was a kid. But being able to go down there and like almost, I don't want to say use it like a library, but not use it like a library.
They use it like a library. They do. And they, we've got separate stacks of we call them upstairs books and downstairs books. And we are extra careful with downstairs books. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty terrific. He binged Bone earlier this year in his after hours reading, and was very enthusiastic about the stupid rat creatures for several weeks afterwards.
As he should have been.
Good stuff.
My recommendation, if he hasn't got to it yet, is Amulet by Kazuki Buishi, because
he has read all of Amulet and is wild for the next one, as is everyone.
Yes.
Also all of Five Worlds, also all of the Wings of Fire graphic novels, also all of Adventure Zone, which is definitely too old for him, but he does love it.
What about Faith Aaron Hicks's The Nameless City?
I don't know if he's read those.
Those are so good.
The middle one was unavailable for a while, but they are so good.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing.
It's pretty great. It really is. And then when I get if he's here, when I get a really tricky 12-year-old to make recommendations to, well, I'll call him down and be like, I need your help. There is a difficult 12-year-old here.
So it's kind of like you have a secret employee. You have this employee that you can kind of turn to if you need any kid advice.
I have several secret employees.
I do want to say, I wanted to bring that up, before we get into the meat of this. It does seem like your life would have been made, like your ability to do all this stuff that you have to do when you're not on the floor is made easier by the fact your team has expanded a bit, right? You're up to 3 employees now?
Yeah, so I made a pandemic hire. Their name is Kitty, and they are doing all of our social media, and the newsletter that is so beloved.
It's so good.
I know, right? Is from Kitty. Also, event management is in Kitty's wheelhouse now, so that's off my plate. And yeah, and like you said, there's also just more staffing. Powell's laid a bunch of people off at the beginning of the pandemic, and Kitty is Powell's trained.
Wow.
So they are also just stunningly good bookseller. And adding that to Nick, who has been my right hand since we opened. So he's been with us 6 years now. And Nicole, who I think is coming up on her third year here. It is such a solid team. Nicole manages all of our mail orders, and Nick does everything I don't do. So Nick does a lot of buying and that stuff.
I mean, that makes your life easier. And on top of that, it opens up your ability to do more with certain aspects that you always want to do more with. Like, you know, you mentioned the newsletter and social media and everything. I love the newsletter. The call and response of it reminds me of like Chip Zdarsky's newsletters.
Yeah,
and
totally.
It really works well. And it's funny because it always pipes into the like actual recommendations on the books. And I have to admit, a lot of times I would like to think that I'm pretty attuned to what's going on in comics. And sometimes the messaging in there, I'm just, how did I totally miss this comic? There's like ones that just completely escape me, and Kitty points it out. I love it.
Yep, absolutely. It's really fun. And yeah, definitely like staying on top of events and making sure that all of the tricky stuff. Have we both ordered stock for the event and told the internet that the event is happening? Have both of these things happen?
Right.
Not always when I'm in charge, but Kitty makes sure it gets done.
I love it. I love it. Well, I mean, it makes sense that things are going well. Like, I'm glad that all the employees are helping out and everything. I know that before, when we were doing my kind of year-end wrap-up for 2021, I don't know where you ended up in terms of net performance, but I think gross, you were at like your best year ever at Books with Pictures.
Yep.
Was it best ever even with net also?
It was.
It was?
Yep.
That's amazing.
Followed by our best ever January and best ever February, which, caveat, that's still very low.
Right.
January and February are brutal. And so there is this funny combination right now of, just Q1 in retail is miserable.
Yeah.
And we are right in the thick of it. So, I'm definitely in the like watching the bank account very closely and making sure that all the checks clear and that sort of thing. But it's the best Q1 we've ever had. It's just still hard. And that's, because we're selling more books, so we're buying more books. We're still really, I mean, it's never ending. The management of how we order and from whom we order and all of that stuff to maximize shipping and discounts. I will say that Diamond shipping has always been shady, and it is worse than it has ever been right now. And we can talk about that more if you'd like. But figuring out how to maximize those discounts and order in ways that gets us the books we need when we need them on the reorder side, not even on the new book side, but on the reorder side, is a continuing challenge. And definitely every once in a while I'll look at the numbers and be like, oh, we could have done that better.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot to balance. I mean, a lot of it just kind of comes down to finding the right balance on how you order the inventory and achieve those discounts and do all the stuff like that. There's so much secret sauce stuff to the retail world that I don't think people are really aware of. Like, it's like, oh, you just sell comics, so you sit around and read comics all day and everything like that. And it's interesting. Like, there's that meme from years ago where it was like what people think I do versus what I actually do. Right. And all this stuff. I feel like comic retailers have one of the like largest variances between what people think they do versus what they actually do.
I mean, have you ever had Avi Ehrlich on from Silver Sprocket?
No.
So he is brilliant, for one. But the Silver Sprocket retail store, which is like a half a mile from Mission Comics in the Mission in San Francisco, it is a fully stocked retail store that does not have a retail store that is all comics, all sequential, lots of stapled floppy things, and does not have a Diamond account and does not order anything that is not creator owned.
Interesting.
It is wild walking into that store and seeing the amount of content. Like, I keep my indie section well stocked, but compared to Avi, novice. And he does it managing literally dozens of different distributors and direct publisher accounts with teeny tiny publishers literally all over the world. He's bringing in comics from Israel. He's bringing in comics from France. He's bringing in comics from Denmark. Just amazing work as a retailer, and a beautiful, beautiful space. But yeah, we were talking about it the other day because he's got some accounts I'd like to have, and I'm trying to figure out how to have one. And we were describing it as the grimoire of ordering for the shop. It is the secret book that has all of the details, including things like, only reach out to this person on Tuesdays, whatever it is, before 10 a.m. Eastern time on Tuesdays is the only time you can call this number.
I even think, though, that something like the seasonality that you mentioned, like Q1 being really slow, would surprise the average person. But it's interesting because I've had a hard time figuring out why that's the case in comics. I mean, obviously, coming after the holidays, there's going to be a dial back in terms of how people spend and everything like that. But at the same time, it sometimes feels like there's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy to it, because publishers go from like making a lot of books and releasing them in the fourth quarter to like really dialing it back in the first quarter. And I don't know, sometimes it's, like I said, it feels like a self-fulfilling prophecy when it comes to the seasonality, where maybe if they published more like top books during that time, there would be more attention to it. I don't know.
Maybe, but I do think that there also is a real post-holidays hangover.
Yeah.
And I mean, the other thing that's just sort of on the logistics side, we've had a worryingly mild, we'll say, winter here in Portland this year. But in a typical like rough Portland winter season, we can go Thanksgiving to Valentine's Day without an on-time shipment. And so in some ways, not releasing big hit books in the time of year when getting books logistically into the world makes sense to me as well. It's also, when the weather's bad, we're a neighborhood store. People walk to us. When the weather's bad, people don't.
Yeah.
It's harder to get out. It's dark. It's dark at 4:30 in the middle of winter here. So, which I recognize an Alaskan is not impressive, but it's dark for us.
Yes. It's all relative. We're used to it.
Yeah. So those darkness, coldness, wetness, slipperiness, those are all factors.
Yeah, that makes sense. I do want to bring up one thing in regards to, so 2021 was your biggest year. I know previously, for a lot of reasons, like the move in 2019, pandemic, slightly big deal. There's a lot of like year-to-year variance as of, for the shop. It's just going to happen because there's a lot of contributing factors. But it seems like you're in a pretty healthy track right now. It seems like you're kind of, I got to knock on some wood right now, but I mean, it feels like you're kind of in a pure building phase. Like you've kind of figured things out and then you're just moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, current cash flow concerns will resolve. I definitely am as confident as I have ever been in this role. I feel like there are fewer unknown unknowns.
Sure. As opposed to the known unknowns.
Yeah, I mostly know the things that we're doing not well enough. I know the places we want to improve, and there are a lot of them, but they all feel more or less within reach given available time and money. The physical building is having a really hard time this year, and so a lot of energy is going into trying to do repairs and maintenance and upkeep. And we had the best worst thing about owning the building is that all of that is my job.
Right.
We had a few windows broken just due to vandalism because we're on a main street and there's a massive mental health crisis and people smash windows. But when the window guy came in to fix it, he discovered that the entire window frame was dry rotted because the building is 100 years old and it has not been maintained properly. And so the window guy says, I can't do this until you reframe the wall. And the wall contractor comes in and he says, well, I can't really reframe this part of the wall until I reframe the whole wall. And so, then we're $40,000 in the hole on bids. And I'm trying to figure out what the insurance will pay for and what we need to fundraise. And, it's all part of the process. I'm not in a place where I look at the broken window and think this is going to sink us.
Right.
But I am at a place where I look at the broken window and think about what resources are available to us to pull through it. And it takes a ton of my time.
Yeah. That's why it's good you have good employees.
Exactly. But yeah, feeling, I feel just poised for growth really right now.
Yeah. Well, and those other things, I mean, you can't predict those things. Those are those unknown unknowns, right? And like it seems like you have your feet under you in terms of the known unknowns. I don't know why that's kind of an awkward thing to say, but it totally is descriptive of it. And now, a quick word from one of off-panel sponsors. Macroverse is a next-generation digital comics platform, and one with an astonishing number of comics, with currently over 50 series from over 100 creators on their app, with a 5-star rating both on Apple and Google's app stores. Download the app and binge all their titles, including the Eisner-nominated Remind from Jason Brubaker, Lisa K. Weber's Hex 11, which has been described as Harry Potter meets Blade Runner, or the new queer supernatural adventure series Husk that launches on November 1st. It's just $4.99 a month to subscribe to Macroverse, with proceeds directly supporting the creators on the platform. Keep an eye on the future of Macroverse 2, as 2022 is going to bring an epic upgrade that offers a new level of digital collectability and more, with early adopters able to sign up for more information at macroverse.com. And now, back to the show. I want to jump into kind of what's working and what isn't. To start, you'd asked me if there's any numbers I wanted you to look up, and one of the ones I wanted to ask was the split between collections and graphic novels versus single issue comics, because in my head, Books with Pictures is probably more of a collections and graphic novel shop versus a single issue shop. Not that you don't do the latter. It's just, you when Saturday is your biggest day, that suggests to me that you probably are attracting readers who are looking for graphic novels and manga and collections and things like that. So what's your split?
It's probably 70-30. 70 bound books, 30% single issues. I don't have a super good button to punch on the point of sale to get that metric in my pre-burrito number crunching this morning. But my ballpark is that it's 70-30.
Yeah, that's about what I expected.
Our top selling single issues, I was actually surprised to see this because the X books are still hot for us. The X books have been hot for us since the Hickman takeover. Saga, obviously, now that Saga is back, Saga is extraordinarily hot. And after that, I was surprised. So Saga's our best-selling single. Second best-selling single right now is actually The Last Session, which is a miniseries from Mad Cave Studios about after-school GSA club whose advisor doesn't show up, so they decide to play Dungeons and Dragons instead. And it's about their Dungeons and Dragons game. It is like an actual play in adorable comic book form.
I'm not gonna lie, if you give me 1,000 guesses, I would not have guessed that. Mostly because I didn't actually know that comic existed until this very moment. That is amazing.
It's extremely cute. And we're on whatever issue, I think 3 of 5. So like it's a mini series. It's not going to stick around. I hope something turns up to take its place. But it's selling like crazy. I'm perpetually underordered on it. After that is Harley Quinn, the animated series.
Oh yeah.
Love that one. After that is Marauders.
Mm-hmm.
And of all the X books, I did not expect Marauders to be our top selling X book. I mean, I love it for obvious reasons.
Your email does end also with Hold Fast, which I feel like is very, I mean, obviously Katie Pryde, Hold Fast, et cetera, but still.
Uh-huh.
You returned with an action figure.
This is my birthday present this year.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Is that a custom or is that an actual?
Captain Kate. Apparently, if you pay extra money on Marvel Unlimited, you got one of these this year.
Okay, I should get that.
Captain Kate with Cutlass and Lockheed was a gift from my pal Brian Stratton over at the Marvel by the Month podcast. Yeah, I love her very much.
Yeah.
So yeah, Marauders, and then after Marauders, it's Hawkeye Kate Bishop.
There you go.
So like that's where we're at in terms of single issues.
Right.
Saga far and away on top.
Oh yeah.
But then just sort of a motley little crew, and those are our since January 1st. So those are our Q1 bestseller single issue numbers.
I do think it's interesting, and like not to, again, attack like a theoretical version of what people think about comic shops, but at the same time, it's like, I think a lot of times when people see like the order charts, they assume that there'll be a lot of overlap between what shops sell or don't sell. But I mean, each shop in the entire country, in the entire world, is made up of individuals, and individuals who go to those shops because they like what that individual has done. And it's going to be each one's going to be wildly different than one to the next. I remember talking to Jen King at Space Cadets Collection down in Texas. I remember like a few years ago, one of her top books was this comic called Anne Bonny, and I don't even remember who the publisher was, and I'd never heard of that comic either. But at the same time, it spoke to her audience, and so did The Last Session. I have to say, I imagine that Mad Cave book is going to do really well in collections for you too.
I'm sure it will. Yeah, absolutely. And what's interesting is that we have a young adult section in trades, but we don't have a young adult section for singles. And so stuff that falls on the side of the line of young adult gets shelved with adult in singles and then moves into the young adult side of the kids section in trades.
Sure.
And that can be a little tricky in terms of selling those books in singles. That 15-year-old may not be browsing in the right spot to find the singles. And if they don't ask for help, they're not going to get the hand sell.
Mm-hmm.
And then they'll find it when it comes out in trades. So
is that top 5 a product of your audience or a product of hand selling or a bit of both?
Saga has brought back a set of people who haven't touched comics in 3.5 years.
Right.
That, I mean, not that we don't hand sell Saga, but that's on them.
Right.
Last session is definitely a hand selling piece. I don't think anybody came in for it.
Right.
They did give us a nice amount of pre-sales marketing. So we had a poster up for it early that was very charismatic. We gave away a couple of dice sets, I think, when we were still in pre-order phase, that they had made, like custom dice sets. So that one, people were into it once they were told about it, but nobody like organically heard about it and came in for it. Harley Quinn, the animated series, that's got an audience baked in. We've also started marking with shelf markers which single issues are LGBT content.
Mm-hmm.
That marker sells books in my store. So that's definitely something that my audience wants more information about it. You know, and it's really worth noting that of this top list, only Kate's straight, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, she is canonically straight, but Kate's not, and Harley's not, and The Last Session is a very queer book, and then Saga's got every identity in it. So,
right.
You know, that's part of this story too, is that these are, you know, my target market is kids and women and queer folks,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what these books reflect.
Well, and that's baked into the identity of Books with Pictures because, you know, Portland has a lot of shops. They have a lot of shops that are serving a lot of different audiences. And I mean, fundamentally, that's what Books with Pictures was all about, is being the inclusive shop, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And Portland is also currently really, we're in a sort of transition period for sort of safe queer specific spaces.
Mm-hmm.
COVID was extraordinarily hard on bars, and we pretty much lost all the gay bars. There's some are coming back, some have been bought. We are losing the quintessential sort of gay diner in Old Town this week, is their last week. It's heartbreaking. Like, it's a spot that was my spot in college, and it's going away. And that is just so sad. But at the same time, there's a new sort of lesbian-owned, women-focused sports bar that's about to open. It's called the Sports Bra. We're very excited to collaborate with them. And then there's us, and we are becoming one of the spaces that, especially for all ages, for folks who aren't going to bars, we are a place you can be. And
Mm-hmm.
we are trying to sort of find better ways to support that with groups as groups become more of a thing, and events and all of that. But that is really a core part of our identity and what we do. And it's something that I think Portland really, really needs right now. So
absolutely. Well, before we move on from the trade graphic novel / single issues, but I actually had a question from a patron. Scott Hazelwood wanted to talk about a larger idea where fans express the idea that they like a series, but they think it'll read it better in trade. So basically, in their minds, why doesn't the publisher just release it as an original graphic novel? Scott, want to know your thoughts on that. Like, why going straight to OGN may or may not make sense for both retailers and publishers. What's your take?
Gosh, Scott, it is so tricky. Thank you for lifting awnings for me the other day. It was very helpful, by the way. A lot of what does get released as direct to OGN isn't doing as well for us. I think the marketing on the publisher side is much better for single issue books than direct to OGN books. And even something like Wind, which was actually intended to be the James Tynion
Michael Dialinas,
book from Boom, which is a terrific seller for us, was intended to be direct to graphic novel, got changed to a single issue series at the beginning of COVID as a gesture in support of retailers. Here's a product you can sell because the supply chain's all messed up. Then got released as a graphic novel. And then the second volume went direct to graphic novel with no singles, I believe.
I think
is
so,
how
yeah.
that went down. The continued monthly presence of the single, even if people aren't buying it, helps sell the trade.
Yeah.
And I am afraid that the one and done marketing pitch of I feel like mostly where we're seeing it is from Dark Horse. Dark Horse is doing a lot of OGNs right now as a budget cutting thing, and that's fine. But those books don't do as well because they just blip on and off the radar so quickly.
Yeah. You only get one bite of the apple.
And as someone who sells trades better than sells singles, it feels silly to buy singles that don't sell. And a lot of times I do just buy, issue 1 and 2 and we'll pick it up in trade. And yet I don't see those direct to graphic novel books in the adult space perform as well.
Yeah.
In kids and YA, in middle grade, no problem. In fact, I wish there were more singles for kids and YA, but we're certainly not hurting for selling that content when it comes direct to trade. But adult books, it's hard to sell them when they go direct to trade.
I wonder how much of that is tied to expectations for how things work. It's like kids in YA don't have those feelings that like this is how it works, while adults maybe are like, oh, single issues. It's like the single issues, if you're not buying it, it almost acts as like FOMO. It's like, why am I not reading this? I have to read it in trade. I remember one time, right. I don't remember who it was, a retailer told me that basically single issues a lot of times almost act as an advertisement for the eventual trade. And it's such an odd way to look at it, but it's true.
Every month at ordering time, I sit there and I'm like, why am I ordering just one copy of this book that is not sold off the shelf in 3 months?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is because it's a little poster that I pay $1.50 for that tells you you're going to buy the trade. And maybe someone will come and buy it, but otherwise it's a little poster that I paid $1.50 for that tells you you're going to buy the trade.
Yeah.
It is a tricky thing. I do also think that there is a little bit of cultural devaluing in the comic circles of the direct to trade. It's kind of like direct to TV.
Yeah.
Right? Like, well, it wasn't good enough to put out in the mainstream, so we're just going to get it in under the radar. And I do feel like the thing that short-circuited that and has been hugely successful is the format that Brubaker and Phillips are using for their series, and that Fraction and Cartier, I can't say her name.
Elsa Chartier.
Yeah. Chartier used for the November series, those little image hardcovers. Those somehow have enough prestige and like bulk to them.
Yeah.
That they feel like they were intended to come out that way, as opposed to like, we ran out of budget at the last minute, and so we pushed this into a trade.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of the thing for the kids and YA stuff is that stuff is designed to be like that because that's what they're used to. And I think that for adult readers, if you get something, it's like you want something with like a little bit more like heft and weight to it. I mean, every once in a while there's like variants on that. Like I loved Archie Kuo Johnson's No One Else. That was my favorite comic from last year. That is a very small, like almost like Far Side like oriented like shape. But at the same time, it's people want stuff that they can put on their coffee table and like have some heft to it. I think that's important.
Well, and it sits nicely on the shelf.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, all those Brubaker and Phillips books are so beautifully done. But I do want to bring up your most successful poster that you have, Saga. We talked before when Saga returned with 55, and it was massive. It was just huge return. But I think it's really interesting. I mean, this is very typical for comics and really everything. It's like you're always paying attention to things when they're new and hot, and Saga's return was new and hot. 56 came out since. Has the heat continued?
I underordered Saga 55 and I underordered Saga 56, and I ordered more of them than I have ever ordered of a single issue.
That's wild.
Yeah, it is wild. We bought 100 Saga 55 and sold out.
Mm-hmm.
We bought, I think it's 80 Saga 56. We have sold 54 of them and have 20 more still waiting in polls.
Mm-hmm. So it's pretty much gone.
It's pretty much gone.
Yeah.
The readership for Saga is still growing in single issues. I have no other book performing like that. It is wild.
Yeah.
We also, we have more Saga backstock in our storeroom than any other book in of the trades. Selling the regular trades does not make us sell less hardcovers. Selling hardcovers does not make us sell less of the first half collections. They sell. Every form of Saga sells.
I know one thing that I thought was really interesting that you told me when we talked about 55 was that you had people who were trade waiters who pre-ordered 55 just because they wanted to be part of that wave. They wanted to be back on board. And you said that they only pre-ordered that one issue.
Mm-hmm.
Did you find that any of those came back for 56?
Sure did. Yep.
Saga is, I don't know. It's funny. I remember talking to, I think it was Patrick Brower at Challengers, and he said something like, we need more comics like Saga. And I'm like, yeah. I mean, like, nothing performs like Saga at all.
One of my favorites, I don't remember which retailer posted it. Maybe it was you, actually. But on release day, somebody posted a picture of their weather app that's like they have a like fun, sweary, like says obscene things to you about the weather app. And on Saga release day, their weather app said something like, it's cold enough that Brian K. Vaughan will kill everyone you love, or something like that. And like, that was their Saga release day update. And I'm like, is it that mainstream?
That weather apps are posting about it?
That weather apps are posting about it? And then that night I was out driving deliveries, which I'm still doing. And Brian K. Vaughan was on NPR. And I'm just like, okay, like, here we are.
It's so wild. It's so wild. Yeah, there's nothing you can really compare to Saga. I remember one of the first times when it really stood out, just like how successful Saga is when the first issue launched really big in terms of orders, but I think within like 5 issues or something, it was already being ordered higher than its first issue orders, which just doesn't really happen. And then it's just kept building and building from there. But I don't know. It's so interesting. That is one of the things I think is going to be really interesting to see, though, is when the next trade hits is going to be insane. I can't even imagine, because if you're getting this much heat on the single issues, and it is probably, I mean, I don't want to say the single issues are obviously hugely successful, but I think it's definitely more of a collection oriented book. I mean, that's going to be outrageous.
I mean, I was working in an independent bookstore when the last Harry Potter book came out, and I think it will look like that. I'm thrilled. I'm so glad.
Yeah.
It's great.
You just got to order a lot of them because you're always going to sell them.
I got to make sure I've got that cash flow straightened out by the time I need to pay that bill.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I wanted to bring up one thing that you had mentioned to me when we were talking for 2021's performance, and you mentioned it earlier, was that you've had a lot of success working with libraries and how you've made significant sales to ones in the area. And I find that super fascinating, if only because with libraries, I just imagine that they would order graphic novels and trades through the usual means, like they would go through their distributors. How did that happen, and what kind of impact has that had on the shop?
It's something that honestly I wish I was doing better. I would like that to be a bigger market than it is. For Jen Hines at the Dragon up in Guelph, Ontario. That's a huge piece of her sort of daily bite of the apple.
For the Dragon or for ComicsPRO?
For the Dragon.
Okay.
Yes, but I love the librarians I get to work with. I think the really critical piece, especially, so what I'm working with is school libraries. And for school libraries, I give them a discount. They get a 20% discount when they order school materials through me. But the other thing they get is curation. And the work that I do for them is basically making a big list of things that I can get that are appropriate for their age groups, that fit their, pieces of the collection they need to fill. And then they go through that list and tick off which of those things they need and how many. And then I get them. And then I take their PO, and then 6 months later they pay me. And so the process there, I think being able to stay on top of what is new and hot and good in graphic novels is a service that I can provide that is pretty unique. That they don't necessarily have time to go through, with all of the publisher reps. The other thing is that the primary distributor that libraries order through is Baker and Taylor, which doesn't even serve indie bookstores anymore. To my regret, they were the best distributor to work with when they sold to us. But the word from librarians is that they're very difficult to work with. And so having someone else running interference on working with all the different distributors, which, as we mentioned previously, is hard, is a real service to them, and I think is worth the extra 20% that they're paying over what they'd get from a distributor purchase.
Yeah. I mean, the curation element of it by itself is immensely valuable, because it's hard for any one person. I mean, if you're running a library and you're having to try to stay on top of what's big for books, and you have to stay on top of what's big for comics and what's big for all this stuff, that's a lot. I have to admit, my wife, she's an architect and she does a lot of work in schools, and she took a picture recently because she went into the school library for a middle school, and there was a huge graphic novels in comics section, and she took a picture of it. I have to admit, I would say probably 80% of it was manga.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable. Is that kind of the same for you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the manga is currently experiencing its biggest U.S. sales ever.
Yeah.
Bigger than the 90s boom, biggest U.S. sales ever. There's a lot of reasons for that. They're really interesting, but huge manga market right now, in spite of the massive supply chain challenges that we're having getting that product in the store, which continue and aren't going away this year. The appetite for manga is roughly endless. And the librarians who come to me and say, I need manga, I don't know what that means, is amazing, right? And that is something that I can specifically help out with, especially since a lot of the reputation of manga in the US is not great. And so the sense of like the librarian who comes and says, I need manga for my kids, they are middle schoolers, I need something that's not all boobs.
Right.
I can help you with your problem. That is my area of expertise, right? And I'm not a manga expert, but I employ them.
Yeah.
So
that is amazing.
And I'm also newly dating one. I am newly in love. It's very exciting. And also came in one day to find my girlfriend Marion reshelving my manga section because I've done it wrong.
How did you do it wrong?
Well, we have a LGBT like highlight section, and I had forgotten to put some books into it, and so she was pulling books from the main section and reshelving them in the LGBT section.
Is she another secret employee?
Uh-huh.
Have you felt that manga boom in books with pictures as well?
100%. Yeah, absolutely. And the supply chain crunches that go with it.
Yeah. I'm friendly with the team over at Kamikaze over in Tel Aviv, and I feel so bad for them because it takes so long for them to get inventory anyways. And they took pictures of like their shelves when they reordered and had like almost all the shelves filled. And then within a week, they took another picture and almost the entire thing was gone.
Yep.
It's unbelievable.
Yep. It is wild. It is amazing. It's also very frustrating because the inability to get really basic stuff. My Hero Academia Volume 1 on the shelf is...
I heard Chainsaw Man is basically...
Chainsaw Man.
Yeah.
Volume 1. Yeah. All of that stuff. Those shortages are really, really hard. And just the dejected 13-year-old who comes up to the desk and is like, do you have any in the back?
Yeah.
No, kiddo. Everything I've got is up there. Yeah, it's exciting, but I would love for those paper shortages and other supply chain hiccups to loosen up a little, because I do think that we could be doing so much more.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing I keep hearing is just basically like, this is such a huge boom, but what would it look like if the supply chain wasn't broken? It's kind of staggering to even imagine what that would look like.
Yeah. I also, with secret employee / girlfriend Marion, comes a delightful 14-year-old kiddo who is a major anime enthusiast, and is also very helpful for figuring out what the next hot thing that's coming to Crunchyroll is. And is there a manga that goes with that? And can we get it in the store?
You have a manga forecaster.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it.
We could sell this.
I'm sure this will be related to it, but we've talked about a number of things that have been doing really well for the shop. Is there anything that isn't working? Like things that maybe not is like doing poorly, but it's just surprising you with maybe it's a tougher sell, maybe it's something that's causing more complications than you'd expect, maybe some of those unknowns. Or is there anything that stands out in that regard?
We're having a hard time right now. Not even a hard time. Velocity has slowed in Marvel trades.
In terms of release or in terms of sales?
In terms of sales. And I think it is a combination of, like, I'm not stressed about it. It's not our core product. But I think it's a combination of it is hard to keep a full run in. Marvel's not printing enough, and so you frequently cannot get either, you know, 1, 2, 3 of a run or the mushy middle bits of a run, and it's hard to sell a series if I can't have all of the parts of the series on the shelf. It's
Mm-hmm.
just absolutely abysmal policy for picking up new readers, which is what I'm trying to do. So that is a challenge. And then I do also think that Marvel Unlimited is shaving off some of that readership, which is fine. Basically, the delay time on Marvel Unlimited is such that if you're trade waiting it, you might as well just read it digitally.
Yeah.
That's fine. I mean, I subscribe to Marvel Unlimited too.
It is interesting. I don't remember who it was, but one retailer told me that Marvel had switched to a sort of, I don't know if order on demand, not order on demand. There's like almost like a threshold of interest that has to be reached before like they can do a reprint of something. And that's led to a lot of situations where stuff that wouldn't normally be out of print has been out of print. And you're just like, why can't I order Infinity Gauntlet trades? Because you haven't reached that point yet.
Yep. Yep. It's rough. And I do think that there's also some maybe communication challenges since the PRH shift that has affected some of that. Although, frankly, I mean, at the end of Marvel's time at Diamond was as bad as trade availability has ever been with them. So I don't know. That's the supply on that is messy enough that it's really impacting our sales, and it's frustrating.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you know, I have my internal to-do list. So like zine sales are not where I want them to be because I really need to redesign that section, and discoverability is not how I wish it was because there needs to be some redesign and there's stuff that's kind of badly crammed together. We are always ordering fewer single issues.
Mm.
It is just not the sensible place to be putting our money right now. And the move to trade readers is ongoing.
Yeah.
And also the stress around single issue shortages and damages is so much higher than the stress around trade shortages and damages. If I only ordered 6 of a thing with one variant cover and that box got bashed up in shipment, that I am putting a lot of time and energy into getting replacements for, you know, $30 wholesale worth of product. Which is 2 trades. And so that's sort of figuring out where our energy as well as our capital needs to be increasingly disincentivizes being a single issue store. We still have them. I'm happy to sell them.
And now, a quick word from one of off-panel sponsors. That sponsor's Bad Idea. Bad Idea paid for the sponsorship, but they won't give me anything to promote since they're over. So here I am, saying the name Bad Idea. Contractually. I have to. That's it. Bad Idea. They're a thing, I guess. And now, back to the show. It seems like there's almost like a fork in the road that's happening where some shops are like really thriving on the single issue front, and then other ones have found that they know what they can do, and there's no reason to try to push it to be more because the other ones are doing better. Like a good example of that is my buddies over in Dublin, Big Bang Comics. They now do not shelve single issue comics. They only do all their single issue comic customers switched to online orders with mail order during the pandemic, and so now all that space has been converted to trades and manga and graphic novels and everything, and they're making as much, if not more, on single issues as they were before, while still and also, they also have space for toys because they're selling a ton of toys. But
Right.
Anyways, but like everything else they're selling more of, and so it hasn't led to any losses while leading to gains. And I mean that's part of the job, right? That's part of the 5 days you're not on the floor is figuring out how you can use your space more efficiently, because real estate is hugely important in terms of like how can I do this better, but also would I make more if this section was trades instead of single issues?
Yep. I think about it all the time. And am reevaluating. So at this point, our kid to adult split is really coming up on 50-50.
Interesting.
And in terms of real estate on the floor, kids have 25% of the floor. which means that on a Saturday afternoon, especially trying to maintain some semblance of social distancing, that section is a nightmare. There's just not enough physical space to put the people in who want to buy graphic novels in the kids section right now. And so figuring out how to expand that and what I can cut to expand that is one of the main things on my plate right now.
Yeah. Oh, that makes sense. I do want to bring back up distributors because I have to ask about it. I talked to you when Penguin Random House had its first week. I would say that amongst those I talked to, not amongst those I talked to, but amongst those I saw messages from in regards to this, you were definitely more on the understanding side for Penguin Random House's launch. But it's been a while since then. I am interested in how it's going with your current single issue distributors. I know it's a lesser focus for you perhaps than it was before because you're seeing that shift, but how are Penguin Random House and Diamond and Lunar doing on that front?
Yeah, so disclosure, because of my role on the board at ComicsPRO, because this is a major issue for me, I have been in, it had been weekly meetings and it's now bi-weekly meetings with Penguin since 3 months before their launch.
Okay.
So I'm on the phone with them virtually every week, whether I have problems or not. Mostly collecting concerns from the ComicsPRO and sort of larger retailer community and funneling that back into conversation with Tyne and her team to try and make things better. And so there's definitely, I had my first big hiccup with PRH personally for the store supply a couple weeks ago, and it was definitely interesting to be in the very frustrated customer place with these people who I do have a very good and close connection with in terms of rapport.
Mm-hmm.
I had surgery in January. I missed a bunch of stuff. One of the things I missed was paying my PRH bill, which they do not like. But the notice that they were suspending my account came on paper, somehow came 3 weeks after they sent it. Nobody was picking up the phone when I tried to call and resolve it. And so we had a week where we didn't get comics because my account was suspended and I hadn't had an opportunity to fix it.
Right.
And the check was already in the mail and I couldn't do anything more for that, but I also couldn't get through to customer service. And it was a mess, right? And to their serious credit, once we figured it out and explained what was going on, they overnighted our books. We had them Thursday, not Wednesday. Everything was received and on the shelf before noon. It was fine. And they really did sort of pick up and take responsibility and help us move forward once we figured out what was going on. But there was a pretty serious communication glitch there, which is frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
And it's more frustrating because there are various things about their invoicing, their payment processing, their communications, etc., that I have been asking to be improved since this time last year, and that are still, it's not that they're not on the development, the website development hit list, they're just not first. And so there is this frustrating piece that's like, this is a problem, it's been a problem, it's still a problem, I need you to fix it. And the answer is we only have so many software developers and we're already working on it as best we can. And this is just where we are right now in our process. And I promise it's coming. And that is their answer still to a lot of the sort of logistical challenges of working with them. Other things that are still wrong but coming from PRH are, so there was the huge snafu with packaging those first couple weeks, you may recall. Mm-hmm. Where they were putting single issue comics in single wall boxes and tossing them to the winds. And nearly every account had major damages. They did that for 2 weeks before they got new boxes on the line. But the new boxes that they got on the line were stopgap. They were not designed for the job. They were what they had that they could repurpose to move comics in. They are much, much better. They are still weirdly not right. And I am so glad I'm not a packaging engineer because frankly, when I look at it with my eyes, it seems like it should be fine. But by some millimeter of space, the box is fractionally too big so that the comics can rub and bump in a way that they shouldn't be rubbing and bumping and that they don't in a diamond box. And I have complaints about diamond boxes, but the sizing is just fractionally wrong. and it leads to more damages than it should. It's especially bad when there are droppages. Surely that's not a word. Anyway, so some accounts, this fixed their whole problem. Some accounts with, let's say, livelier UPS employees making their delivery, this has not fixed their problem, and it's still in process. It also uses a bizarre amount of bubble wrap. Genuinely, so much bubble wrap.
I love the idea of a bizarre amount of bubble wrap. I just imagine your employees just wrapping themselves after they open it up because they have enough to do it with.
Pretty much. I have several like Etsy sellers in my neighborhood who know that they can just come. They never have to buy bubble wrap again. They can show up on a Sunday morning and take all the bubble wrap they need to ship their, ceramics or whatever. So yes, I am the source of bubble wrap in my neighborhood now. Lunar continues to be the best shipper of comics that has ever been. I don't even understand how their shipments are so perfect. Their shipments are perfect.
It's funny. Most of the people I talk to about Lunar says that. And then some people just really don't like Lunar. And it's like there's kind of a variance. I think a lot of people don't like them because of the fact that in their mind, they're also DCBS.
They are.
Yeah. I mean, they are. Yeah, they're like they're a different company. But I mean, it's like they can't look past that. And understandably, it's like they look at them as a competitor and they're also selling comics. But it is interesting because if you just look at in terms of performance, I would say Lunar is by far the most well-liked distributor right now.
Yep, it's extremely good. I am very grouchy about the matter of DCBS and about the context of Lunar's appearance on the scene, but perfect shipments every time. I was actually in one of my calls with PRH. They asked what you do about shortages and damages with Lunar. And I was like, I don't know, man. I've never had one. They don't happen. I don't even know what the reporting process looks like. It has never come up.
I don't know anything about packaging, but I'm kind of surprised that the others don't just like study what Lunar does.
Well, so this is the thing, is that Penguin Random House's current method is Lunar's method, and something is still not right, and I could not tell you what.
Interesting.
It is a matter of a fraction of an inch between the boxes. I'm glad it's not my job.
No kidding. And I'm also glad. If I did it, it would be an absolute disaster. I don't even wrap stuff that I'm like trying to mail to people. Like I get my wife to do it because she's incredible at it. And if you're going to get it from me, it's going to be terrible. But that leaves Diamond. It sounded like Diamond was being odd even for Diamond.
Diamond is mostly fine in terms of ordering and receiving product. My shipping percentage on an invoice, and it's tricky because they don't put shipping on the same invoice as books. So it lags by a week unless you ask, and then sometimes it's by more than a week, and it's hard to nail them down on what the shipping charge corresponds to. But my shipping from Diamond in the past year has averaged over 10% of my invoices, which is to say my discount with Diamond is whatever it is, 50 to 52%, but I pay for shipping with them where I don't pay for shipping with other distributors necessarily. And it lowers my discount by as much as 12%.
Yeah, that's a lot to eat.
It's huge. And that's since we have stopped doing any kind of direct shipping because the direct shipping charges are even higher. And there's no way to audit it. There's no way for me to say this shipping seems high other than getting into a conversation with their reps and trying to track it down. But I don't have any way to be like, how am I paying this much shipping?
Right.
So it is what it is. And it's meant that we have massively throttled, in particular, our reordering with Diamond. If we can get it somewhere else, we do.
I know that was one of the concerns when Marvel was leaving. It was just like what that was going to do to shipping. And it has been interesting to see a number of publishers go to kind of like a multi-distributor model. Like Vault just went over to Lunar also, where they're not exclusive and they can do multiple. That makes sense to me, but I don't know. It's such an odd place. But I want to close with some larger stuff. I want to talk about the ComicsPRO whole thing. You're on its board as its recording secretary. I know you put a lot of time into doing that too, working with Jen Haynes and the rest of the team there to try to make things better for shops overall. That is, we're living in a time where everybody's got multiple jobs. That's a job on top of another job. That's things that you have to pay attention to. But it seems like you're really enjoying it. Like, what has that experience been like for you to be really in the thick of things in that regard?
I mean, I'm a person who loves to have the big picture. I like knowing what's going on that is affecting what's happening in my shop. And I also I love getting to be sort of team comics. I love getting to think about what we need to do to make the role of comics and sequential art in popular culture bigger
Mm-hmm.
and better. How do we get more people buying comics? How do we get more people buying comics in comics shops? What do comic shops need to do to get more people into them? As we said earlier, like my role is very much a diversity focused role, as What Books with Pictures does. And I'm not going to say that every shop should do what I do. I don't think they can. I don't think every market is right for it. But I do think that there are things about what I do that would benefit a lot of shops. And so trying to be a voice for that is great. I love it, honestly. I love talking to people about how to make a better kids section and what to focus on to make their shops more inclusive. Yeah, that I love. And I also really love getting to have the conversations with retailers when they're struggling, and then sort of connecting that with actual communication lines of communication to get those struggles resolved. It's not every time, and it's not fast, but those things feel really good. So yeah, it's a role I like having, and I look forward to continuing to do it. I also really, really enjoy working with Jen. And I am also really excited about our new board members who are, what's Atan from Cape and Cowl.
Oh, Aton?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. He's on the board now?
He's on the board now, and I adore him.
Oh my God.
I am really looking forward to seeing what he does and how he contributes to the whole thing.
You went to the shop for Douglas's tour, right?
I did.
I really want to make it down to that. I mean, honestly, like Cape and Cowl I order from them every once in a while when Bosco's is shorted comics. Bosco's my shop here in Anchorage, Alaska, and he always just goes above and beyond. He's such a great guy.
So I completely adore him. I adore his staff. Their expansion is beautiful. So they doubled their space during the pandemic. They also were in the process of building, but have now built the most gorgeous back issue cabinets I have ever seen in the back of their shop. They're like built-in, custom, gorgeous drawers. But yeah, it was actually the last stop on the tour, and Douglas and I were both exhausted. And we pretty much just set up a little camp in the back issue section of the store and stayed there all day. And everyone was very nice to us.
I imagine that's like the ideal environment for Douglas.
Yeah, no, it was very good. He paid our rent by leaving random Post-it notes on back issues, like he does in my store in my drawers.
Yeah.
But he just like went in and stealth posted a bunch of back issues to show why they were special and you should buy them.
Yeah. We're talking about Douglas Wolk, the writer of All of the Marvels, the book that came out that is literally about him reading all of the Marvel comics, which is just an insane thing. I'm a big fan of Cape and Cal, but I think it's interesting. Like the last few years, partially by choice with taking on the ComicsPRO stuff, but also because of the pandemic, I feel like you've been in a period where you've either been forced to or been choosing to learn a lot about your role by communicating with others, but also looking at it from a different point of view. Do you feel like you've learned a lot over the last couple of years as a retailer and kind of where you want to go forward with all of this?
Yeah, yes and no. I feel like in some ways, I feel like I'm really coming to a spot where I'm established in doing what I want to be doing. I've got the Eugene store run by Andrea Gilroy, my business partner down there. She opened at the beginning of the pandemic, so that's been a wild ride for her, and supporting that has been a part of my day-to-day. On the other hand, I do feel like I'm still getting my head around what I want to do next in terms of my work in the community, in terms of expanding things with libraries. Do I want to open another location? What is the 5-year plan from here? I'm really not. 5 years ago, I knew. And I think I've hit a lot of those benchmarks, or a lot of those benchmarks have changed for good reasons. And I know what I need to get done this year and maybe next year in terms of finishing projects that are in flight. But I'm not in a place right now where I feel like I have a really good vision of what the next big thing is. I'm still sort of, I think especially disrupted by the pandemic, I'm still sort of finishing a lot of the last set of next big things. So we have our food carts behind the shop that will be opening next month, and I'm finishing the build out and I still have welders on site most days. Like there's stuff happening. Not to mention, the previously brought up infrastructure problems of the building itself, which is leaky. So there's sort of both of those things going on. I'm not sure what the next big thing is.
Yeah.
But I'm excited to find out. But at the same time, like there is literally not a day where I don't talk to other comics retailers, probably more than one. So that's kind of great. There's a real feeling of community, both in and out of ComicsPRO members. But there's a real feeling of community among sort of the retailers who are kindred spirits to me. And I love having them in my world. They're a huge support.
I talk to a lot of retailers, and I would say, and you might disagree with this because you talk to them in a different context than me, but I feel like, especially after the initial period with Penguin Random House, I feel like we've entered it. It feels like shops have been a little bit more or pretty positive lately. It's not been. I'm not saying that they're always negative. It's just like I think a lot of times when people call attention to retailers, that it's because they have something to be upset about, and so that's when that's how they get presented. But the shops I've talked to, it seems like a lot of them are really happy about the direction things are going. Obviously, things could improve in certain parts. There's the known knowns and the unknown unknowns. But at the same time, it feels like it's kind of in a healthy place. And that seems like a good place to be.
Unless you're Brian Hibbs.
I didn't say it. Anyways, to close, I have to ask, just from a personal standpoint, what has you really excited about running a comic shop right now? Could be a title, could be a part of the job that you find energizing. What is it?
I love hand selling books. It is my favorite thing to go in and stand at the register and have someone come in and say something fun like, I haven't liked a comic book since Transmetropolitan, show me something good. And get to sell them a book they want. I love it. I love that part.
I even talked to the owner of my shop. I was like, what if I just came in on Wednesdays and I was a person who talked to people about comics enthusiastically? Would you be okay with that? And I think he was probably like, what is this guy talking about? And I totally get that. I mean, it must be amazing to discover something that you love and then just spread that love to other people.
I mean, I'll tell you, I was selling books at the David Walker Douglas Wolk on stage conversation that happened last night here in Portland. I was in the lobby being the bookseller, and someone asked a very sort of confrontational question about the objectification of women in comics, and when will that stop? And David and Douglas each gave sort of a thoughtful answer about the role of creators and publishers and audiences in shaping what gets made in comics. And then at the end of his answer, David said, but if you really want good book recommendations, there's a bookstore in town called Books with Pictures, and they can help you out. And the crowd cheered.
That is amazing.
A theater full of people, and there was just a cheer went up. And I got to tell you, it felt pretty great.
As it should. Well, Katie, that is all I have for you. I love your store, even though I haven't been to the quote-unquote new version because it's been a pandemic since it was opened. But I love your shop. I love everything you do. I appreciate you coming on to talk about everything about Books with Pictures.
Always happy to chat, David. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with retailer Katie Pryde. You can find Katie's shop, Books with Pictures, in Portland, Oregon, and on the shop site at bookswithpictures.com. Also, big thanks to Deanna Chapman for stepping in to edit this podcast. If it sounds better this week, it's because of her. Love Off Panel and want to support it? Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts today and give the show a rating or review while you're at it, but 5 stars only. You can also support the show by backing on Patreon. Find the show at patreon.com/offpanel, and when you back it on there, you get early access to each week's podcast as well as weekly content and more. Want even more? Subscribe to my subscription comic site, Sketched, at sketch.com for long-form articles, interviews, and the rest of the site's content, and its members-only forum. You can find Off Panel and Sketched on social media by liking it on Facebook at /Sketched. That's SKTCHD. Follow on Twitter and Instagram at @SketchComic, or following me at @SliceFriedGold. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Cameron Brown, Rom V, Devin Fitzsimons, Nick Walker, Patrick Coyle, Isaac Oren, Scott Carpenter, Rent Narb Studios Comics, Capes and Tights Podcast, Klaus Van de Ven, Brian, Submit Industries, Raj Patel, Jack Mulqueen, Kyle, Carl Kerschel, Robert Masella, Elza Chartier, Luke Nakashoji, Elliot Metz, Dr. Luke, Scott Hazelwood, Scott Buwan, Michael Tunk, Canadian by Proxy, Johnny Cannon, Bradley Rader, Carl Troy, Brandon DePillis, Patrick Brower, Declan Shalvey, Dan Guarino, Josh Williamson, Adam Freeman, Ben Wild, Brian Klein Q, SB, Nick Bennett, Daniel Whitfield, Susanna Polo, Reed Hinkley Barnes, Mario Tiambang, Andrew Carita, Matt Mahoney, Charlie Chu, Stephen Hall, Pensacola Pop Comics, Kim Eslem, Philip Myra, Christian Shelton, Kenny Porter, Chris Pacello, Torin Grumbeck, Fuzz Bubbles, Christopher Todd, Transmitter Down, Waltz Comics and Books, Carl Mizell, Paul Slates, Akil Wilson, Alex Dimitriopoulos, Terry Dodson, Wesley Giff, Sean Kirkham, Alistair Ross, Julio Anta, Brett A. Schmidt, Jason Gidmanson, Paul Reinwan, Vita Ayala, Tara Ferguson, Dave Slusher, WMQ Comics, Akil, Kokachi, Sean Pinello, Ken Heidelman, Philip Seavey, Al Ewing, Ryan Alcock, David Kelly, Robert Wilson IV, Nick Plato, Brendan Fletcher, Jonathan Nilsson, Matthew Groom, Jason Assey, Adam Bogart, Matthew Taylor, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Baraldi, Nick Hall, Bjorn Basin, John Hendricks, Steve Anderson, Ian Maxfield, Cliff Chang, Colin McMahon, Chris Palmer, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fairbairn, Kat McKenzie, Adam Highfield, Fiona Staples, Mark Abbott, Mike Murphy, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim Demonakos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comics Art in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. A quick thanks to Upright T-Rex Music, who wrote and performed Op Panel's theme song just for the show. Check out their music on Spotify because it's completely delightful. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.